so these two things, right? So that is what are the role track. As we move on to V, that is, and you guys have the workbook. So the other one is telling us how to, that's just a lot. So if you see yourself moving in the right direction, so the question stem tells you which, another way of looking at it, these are all rungs of the ladder of how you work. All right, so these two things, obviously I'm going to teach my two things, which is the RSVP and the FNBM. So the RSVP is the process. That is the process you go through when you're answering these questions. And the FNBM is kind of the priority. Like, what do you do for what? What do you do when it's the first question? What do you do when it's the next? And so forth. All right, so the RSVP is the breakdown. That's how you break down the scenario and understand the context. The FNBM is how you select the correct answer based on the priority, like where you are in the social work helping process or, in the scenario. All right, so that is what RSVP stands for. I'm sure you guys already know that. So before you answer, you need to know who you are and where you are. That is pretty much what you need to think about when you're thinking RSVP. So first, the role. Who are you? So you need to identify, like in that role, in that scenario, are you a supervisor, an administrator, a case manager? Are you a community social worker? Those terms that you hear all the time. A community social worker is not doing the same thing as a private practice therapist. So you need to be aware of what role you are in. The role track, you do not act outside of your role. So if you're a supervisor, you're not treating the client directly. You're treating the client, how are you treating the client if you're a supervisor?
Indirectly, right?
Yeah, through who? Like who? How are you?
The supervisor.
Through the supervisee.
Through your supervisee, exactly. You're not treating the client directly. You're treating them, like you said, indirectly through your supervisee. If you're a policy analyst, you're not doing clinical therapy. So some of these things you have to be aware of who you are in that test question scenario. Safety, when you're looking at that, is there any danger? Obviously, safety trumps everything. So safety first. Obviously, when you're reading the question, it's always going to tell you who you are. And before we jump into doing anything else, we need to look and make sure there's no safety issue. Is any type of immediate risk of life or safety, suicide, homicide, medical emergencies. What else would be, anything else that you guys can think of that would be considered an emergency?
Suspected abuse.
Okay, abuse. That's there. Abuse is up there. Anything outside of what I have suicide, homicide, abuse, elder and
suicide
child.
ideation. I said suicide ideation with a plan.
Yep, that's
psychosis.
I asked you guys, did you have anything else besides what I had listed there? See, I have suicide, homicide, abuse, child and elder, and I have medical emergencies. So if you have anything else that will fall under a safety issue. All right, so as we move on to V, that is validate. Sometimes people put values here, and I'm okay with that because values will fall under like ethical stuff, like what ethical value it is. But for me, when I created this, validate just seemed better option here. That is when you're pretty much acknowledging the client's feelings, because when you meet with the client, first and foremost, if you're working with a client, the first thing we're going to do is your role, where you are, what your position is. And then we want to make sure in that scenario, if there's any safety issue, we need to just stop right then and there and address the safety issue. If anything else is going on with the client that's not a safety related issue, we normally validate the client. We acknowledge, hey, it seems like you've been dealing with a lot of stress. If they're homeless or whatever they're dealing with, we need to acknowledge that. We can't just move on and start treating them before we acknowledge where they are and validate their situation. All right, that is pretty much building rapport and building a connection with the client. That is just social work 101, what we would do with the client. All right, the validation trap. We do not validate facts. We validate feelings. So if a client says I'm worthless, you don't say, I understand you feel worthless. You say, I hear your pain. So we want to that's a big difference. If they say that I'm worthless or I'm a horrible person, you don't say, I understand that you feel like you're a horrible person. We kind of just be mindful of how we're reframing it. And sometimes questions will ask you what to say and how you would say it. I meant to ask you guys what was next after RSVP, but it is the P. So what stage are you in? So this is where you guys need to know the social work helping process. You need to know the stages of treatment for sure. Will we go over that? Absolutely. But right now we're focusing on the actual strategy. So if you're going to use this strategy, you need to understand the process. What happens in the beginning stage of treatment, in the middle stage of treatment, at the end of stage of treatment. So having an idea of what takes place there. If you're looking for something that says during the initial session, or the social worker has been working with this client for the last 6 months, or the social worker has helped the client meet all their goals, they're pretty much telling you where you are in that social work stage. But sometimes we're so tricked up on the question and reading everything and all the fluff and trying to dissect the meat and everything else that we missed the little little things. So these are the little things that are mentioned right then and there in those questions that we need to be aware of. So a process trap is you do not intervene before you assess. I know you guys have heard me say that a trillion times. That's what people have written that down when they go on the testing site. Just sit down, and you know how you get to write down. For those of you who've never taken a test before, you do get an opportunity to kind of brain dump. And they give you like a dry erase board or something where you can write everything on, or either they have it, I've seen it where they actually have it on the computer, but some people say they still get the little dry erase board and marker and stuff. So I don't know, those of you taking the test recently, what do you have or what did you use to do the brain dump?
Yeah, dry erase board.
Okay.
And a pen.
So if you have that dry erase board and a pen, then you definitely want to make sure that you are doing just that. You're making sure that you're not, when you're doing it, when you're actually writing down your stuff, you want to write the FNBM, you want to write the RSVP, but most importantly, do not intervene before you assess. And that'll let you know when you're answering the questions, how to proceed and how to move forward. All right, so RSVP in 30 seconds. This is just a quick reference just to know what the RSVP is. In quick 30 seconds to go over it, I will give you guys a chance to see it and kind of knowing. And you guys have the workbook. We'll give you some clues and hints on this as well. And obviously, I want you guys to know this so you can utilize it. So if you got a little sheet of paper or you're writing in your workbook as you go along with this, or you have a little scrap sheet of paper or a notepad or something, I would write RSVP down, because when we're doing questions throughout, I want you guys to think about, do you feel comfortable using this? Is it easy? Does it just flow and come naturally to identify the role, whether there's any safety issues, validating and processing what's taking place?
I would say it's helpful though.
All right, so it says always run the RSVP check before you look at the answer choices. So that is an easy way to do it. So if you have the question in front of you, and some people just jump to the answer options, what it's stating is that before you even look at those choices, just identify first, what's your role? Is there any safety issue? What are you validating? Or is it a need to validate the client in this situation based on what's taking place? And what stage are you in? Like, if you're in the beginning stage, the middle stage, like that's what you're asking yourself. A quick check, that's it. You see the question, go through those quick 4 things in your head and just keep it moving. FNBM. All right, this is going to tell us how to prioritize and filter through these questions. And that's pretty much, this is looking at the STEM. So the other one is telling us how to, what to do and where we are in the situation and all that stuff as it pertains to the question. The FNBM is going to tell us like how we need to answer it accordingly based on what it states. So first is what you do right now. To me, this is probably one of the most simplest ways to think about the test question to go through, because all you need to know if the question says first, next, best, most. Like, you just need to know what it says. I have had hundreds, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of people since this program has started, and it definitely weekly, daily, all the time, messaging on every platform known to man that they FNBM did all through the test and pass. Like, this is just the number one thing. So some people do need extra support, extra tools, but there are a lot of people who just sit down, watch videos, take notes, and utilize the system and did wonders on the exam. I'm talking about 15-point increase, 20-point increase. Again, I have to emphasize this. Some of you guys have taken the test multiple times, and sometimes that's just what it is. I've had so many people that I've worked with that have increased their score by 15 points, 20 points, and they're upset. Some of them are like, hey, I've made so much progress, I can't even be mad. Because when you're jumping 15, 20 points on this type of exam, that is huge. That is huge. So just think about it. All the people that fell 10 points short, if you had a 20-point increase, what would that look like? That's just a lot. So if you see yourself moving in the right direction, you know you're doing something right. You just got to be patient with yourself, give yourself grace, learn what you can, and don't overwhelm yourself, because that is a big piece. You don't want to overwhelm yourself in this process. All right, so what first usually looks like? You're normally building rapport, clarifying a problem, securing some type of safety thing, validating feelings. You're doing that stuff. That's what you do first. Like, you don't just jump in. You kind of just ease your way into something. That's why it's the first question. Like, what you do next is differently. But first, that is pretty much like literally the initial contact with the client, or the initial thing that you're doing with the client. So obviously you're not intervening, because the first question, I wouldn't even be looking at anything that says intervene, or the social worker will do this, or provide psychoeducation, or any of that stuff. First thing we're typically doing is building rapport, making sure there's no safety issue, validating feelings, connecting with them, assessing for sure. These are the things that we're doing first. So after the first, you have next. This is the logical step. So just think about it life. Like, the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning, well, everybody does something different. Some people pray, some people brush their teeth, some people wash their face, some people just leave out. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's the first thing that you do, literally. And then there's a next. So the first thing you do is maybe wake up and maybe you make your bed. And then the next thing you do something else. So you have a chronological way of doing something. It's an order to it. That's how you have to think about the test. So if you see a question and it says, what do you do next? clearly in order for it to be a next, you had to do something first. So you know you're in a stage that the person probably has already been assessed. You probably already have some type of treatment plan or diagnosis or something has already taken place. You have a rapport. So you can do something a little bit more because you're on that next stage, the next part of it. So just think about that when you're actually answering the test question. So if a client reveals trauma for the first time, what should the social worker do next? Now remember, this is the first time they're telling you they dealt with some trauma. Maybe they were abused as a child or something happened. So the question is now saying, what do you do next? The first thing you want to do is validate what they're saying, like validate, like that must be tough what you went through, or, you know, thank you for sharing that. I know that was hard, or something along those lines. You're validating it, and then you can move forward to moving on to doing something else. Now, if it says the client revealed trauma for the first time, what should during the meeting with the client for the first time, or doing an initial session, or whatever your role is, and they're meeting with the client, and the client has a traumatic past, and they begin sharing some things. If you're meeting with them for the first time, you're clearly doing what? Like, this is the first time you're meeting with them, initial session, and it says, what do you do first? What are you likely going to do in that moment?
Assess.
Yep, we need to get a little bit more details, a little bit more information along the lines. Part of the FNBM, of course, is the B, the best, the gold standard. Best is what's most clinically appropriate, what is most comprehensive, or what is like the most ethical thing to do in that situation. So if you could only do one thing, this is that thing. And these best questions are the one that really trick people up, because there's normally really good answer options. So when these are the ones that trick people up, they're like, oh my God, they all looked amazingly good. They look like I should do them all. I didn't know what to do, because it's not the first or the next where you can kind of wean out what stage you're in. It's like, what is the best? So this one, you have to really know evidence-based practices. You have to know what's the best, the gold standard for individuals that have borderline personality disorder, or someone that's dealing with trauma, or something along the lines. You have to then know this information. So this is all the content you learn. When you see those best questions, you then got to really break it down and know what is the best thing to do based on treatment, based on ethics, all of that stuff. So this is the one that really gets people when it comes to like breaking down questions and they're trying to figure out what to do or how to answer it in the exam. And most. All right, so most, if we're looking at that, we have the highest priority. So this is the highest option. It's often used when all the answer choices are technically correct, similar to best. A lot of times people say I get confused with best and most. Blend them together at this point. As long as you understand that the best question and the most question, those questions are the most likely ones that trick people up, and you need to make sure that they're most client-centered, they're the most clinically sound, they're the most ethically bound. Like, these are the things you need to look at. So first and next, I kind of like to put them together because they're coming in chronological order. It's either you're doing something first and then it's the next thing after you've already done the thing. And then when I look at most and best, sometimes they do confuse people, and I can see why. But when you're looking at, again, most, the highest priority. So this one is safety, legal mandates, feelings, facts, if you're in the early stage, client self-determination, all of these types of things are what you're considering and looking at when you're doing what is the most appropriate is what you're likely to see. All right, this is the FNBM in 30 seconds. So this is a quick reference tool for you guys to use. We are doing amazing on time, guys. So I know you guys feel like we're moving fast, but I feel like we are moving slower than normal, and I'm excited. That's a good thing. Looks like we're going to get a lot of things accomplished this weekend. So the question stem tells you which filter to use. If it says first, do not pick the best answer at that moment, because you are dealing in the first stage of treatment, the initial thing that's taking place. All right, so the priority ladder. This is the priority ladder. Some people have heard me. I've done some of this in YouTube videos as well. I introduced it in a few strategy sessions and boot camps and all that good stuff. But the priority ladder is 7 rungs. So again, I don't want to confuse you guys. So a rung is basically that little line that's on the ladder. If you've seen a ladder before, you see all the little lines that go up and down the ladder. Those are the rungs. So when you're using the priority ladder, which my coach Taja Ray, she is, amazing. I have so many people sign up to do one-on-ones with her. It's amazing. I'm like, hey, like, what is it? They just love working with her. But she swears by and teaches everyone she works with how to utilize the priority ladder. She shared that was her saving grace on the exam. She talks about how helpful it was and how meaningful, how easy it was for her to kind of go through the test utilizing this. So again, FNBM and RSVP to me are very simple. They're easy to use. That's kind of how I look at questions and can do it. But the priority ladder, I'm always thinking of other things that can be used that are easy, that people can kind of put in place as well that might be helpful. And this is one of them. So looking at the priority ladder, the first rung is immediate safety. As you notice, nothing's changed. Every strategy, everything that we've ever go over and talk about, you notice safety is always first. So that's not changing. So on the priority ladder, that is the first thing. When you're looking at a question, you want to look. And let me back up. When you use the priority ladder, this is when you have those test questions and everything just looks right. And you're just sitting there at the screen like, there's no way they're asking me this question. I have no idea what to do because they all look amazing. This is what you would do. You use the priority ladder. The first one is immediate safety. Imminent risk, suicide, ideation, plan, means, abuse in progress. Always first, no exception. We're not making any exceptions here whatsoever. The second rung is the basic needs. We need to make sure the individual has food, shelter, safety. Where are we going with this? Where's the basic needs coming in now? You could use Maslow all day as another one that you use as a strategy when you're reading questions. The third one is legal and ethical obligations. So basically you have a test question and you're confused. You're like, I don't know what to do with this one. You go through the rung. Is there any safety issues? If there's no safety issues, none of the answers align with that, then you can move on. Are there any basic needs? Anything going on with food, shelter, safety? Any ongoing medical stuff happening in that question? If so, then you stay right there, and that's where you need to be in answering the question. But if not, you move on. You're like, okay, is any legal or ethical obligations taking place in this question? You see how we're using this to move along? If you're stuck between answers and you don't know which one to pick, you have to pick the answer that aligns mostly with immediate safety, basic needs, legal or ethical obligations, and then you're moving on to clinical assessment, treatment planning, intervention, and evaluation and termination. It's pretty much looking at it like the stages of treatment. Another way of looking at it, these are all rungs of the ladder of how you walk through the question. So when two answers both seem correct, the answer on the highest rung always is the one you go with first. So safety beats assessment. Assessment beats intervention. Ethics beats convenience. You see how you're going through that when you're looking at the questions? Did everybody understand that? Does anybody have any questions about that one thing that we're talking about?